QSO Today, episode 337, Peter Butler, W1UU. This episode of QSO Today is sponsored by ICOM America, makers of the finest HF, VHF, and UHF transceivers and accessories for the radio amateur, reminding you, in this new year, to check out their new IC705 all-band portable transceiver, now shipping from your favorite amateur radio dealer. My thanks to ICOM America for their continued support of the QSO Today podcast. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, W1UU, your host. Flex Radio is one of the two platinum sponsors of the upcoming QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo that will return in March 2021. Our list of presentations will again be outstanding, and we will have at least 2 hands-on build-a-thons over the weekend. Please check the QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo website for more information. Peter Butler, W1UU's ham radio journey began with the purchase of a J38 key from one of the kids at school and a trip to the library. Sputnik inspired Peter to a career in microwave engineering, reinforced by his ham radio interest. Peter is the Vice President of CWops and actively involved in sharing his love for CW and good operating practice with hundreds of amateurs who are signing on to do the same. W1UU is my QSO Today. W1UU, this is Eric, 4Z1UG. Are you there, Peter?
Hello, 4Z1UG. This is W1UU.
Peter, thanks for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
Well, it started in 2 phases, but the most interesting part from my standpoint of view, I went to school one day. I think I was in the 7th grade, and some young guy came in and said, "Hey, do you want to buy this?" And it was what I later determined was a J38 key. So I said, "Gee, what does it cost?" He said 25 cents. So I went home and I got 25 cents and I bought the J38 key. And then I showed it to my mother and my father. And they said, "Well, what's that?" I said, "I don't know. I better look and find out." Well, my mother was very good. My mother says, "We only live a very short distance away from the library. Why don't you go out and get a book and read about it?" So that began my official journey into ham radio, is to go to the library. And that's where I gained a lot of information.
And what was the hometown when you started?
Well, my hometown was south of Boston. It's a small town. It's called Whitman in Massachusetts. It was famous for the Toll House cookies, which a lot of people have eaten over the years. But it was a place that my father had a business in a machine shop. He owned a machine shop.
Well, Toll House cookies are chocolate chip cookies, right? Is that what I remember?
That's right. And they're still being made today as Toll House. I think they kept the brand, but I don't know who is putting in the millions of dollars to advertise it these days.
Okay, so you go to the library, you check out a book. What book did you check out?
Well, as it turns out, they have the ARRL handbook. And I said, "Wow, this is pretty neat." It was about an inch and a half thick, and it had all kinds of diagrams in it. So I was a voracious reader to begin with. So I read all the stuff from the book over about a day. And I said, "Gee, this is something I'd like to get involved with."
And then what happened?
The first thing that I had to do was learn how to do Morse code, because that's what it would take to get the novice license. So at least I had a key, but I didn't have a buzzer or anything like that. And also, I didn't have any money. But a couple of years previously, my dad told me, he says, "Hey, son, you ought to try to play a saxophone that I had." So he gave me a saxophone, and I was 9 years old. And I learned very quickly to play the saxophone. When I say learn quickly, like within about 3 days, I learned all the keys and things. So I had this thing in me to say, "Gee, I like learning some things." And that also triggered me to be pretty heavily involved in doing music, especially playing the saxophone. So my first Morse code characters were actually played on my saxophone. I didn't use the key, but I had to learn the code. So I actually learned the code by playing the saxophone. And I learned that pretty quickly, actually.
And how did you receive the code?
Well, I received it myself because I was sending to myself. Then the other thing happened. Not a big happening, but I loved going to my grandparents, and my father and mother used to drive me up there north of Boston. And my grandfather had this beautiful tabletop radio, and it had shortwave. So I started to tune around on the shortwave radio, which he bought basically to figure out what the World War II happenings were. And then I could hear Morse code. And the most impressive piece of Morse code that I heard was basically WCC out of Chatham. And they were sending out Morse code groups. And it sounded beautiful to me. It was like a symphony of one note. I said, well, gee, that's the proper way of sending. I think I better get a sending mechanism for the key. So I think the third most important thing is I actually started to listen to shortwave. So I got an idea of what hams were doing. And I knew what I had to improve upon so I could get my license, which I did when I was 13.
So were there any other hams in Whitman, Massachusetts?
No, I did find out later on there was, but I couldn't find anybody.
How were you able to take the novice test?
Well, that's another good question. Everything I did, I self-taught myself, and I felt very secure that I could pass the test. The theory that they had with Ohm's Law was pretty easy to pick up, but I wasn't sure what would happen when I would go to Boston to eventually take the test to become a novice. But there was another fellow who owned a TV and radio repair shop, and I used to go to see him because he had all the wonderful doodads in his workplace. And he told me one day, he says, hey, you make a great ham for a kid. So that was the other, I would say, instigation. But I think both my father and mother liked the idea that I was self-teaching myself, that I was, not really asking them a lot of questions about things because I couldn't answer them. So I have this internal mechanism where I like to start things up and see how far I could go.
Okay, so how did you get to the point where you actually took the novice test?
Well, I went to Boston. That's how I had to take the test. And my mother drove me there. And we went to the State House, Customs House, the Customs House in Boston, where they had the FCC offices. And I sat down and told them I wanted to take the novice test. And I had all the paperwork and all that. So the first thing they did is they gave me the code test. So I figured they'd give me the technical thing first, but they wanted to know if I could do the Morse code. So they had a machine there that on a tape, and they played it at 5 words per minute because that's what the novices were required to do. And I wrote down 5 minutes of copy, and the inspector looked at it. I don't quite remember who he was, but he was obviously an older gentleman because I was 13, and I figured he looked to be about 75, but he's probably younger than that. And he looked at it and he says, hey, you've done very well. And he said, I also like the way you printed out all the letters. You're very efficient. So, okay, now you take the test. Well, the novice test wasn't very long. There weren't too many questions. All the things that I studied were is that practically they give you the test in some of these study books. So I had to do an Ohm's Law thing. I always remember that. But there was also things about some of the regulations and so forth. So after about, I guess I was in the office for about half an hour or so. The gentleman says, you look very good. I want to send your application in. And of course, I was thrilled to death. And then I remember my mother took me out for a milkshake afterwards to get me calmed down. Little did she know, or my father know, this thing really took off when I got back home. And of course, I had to wait for the license to come through. So I got it in June of 1954. It was a very pleasant moment to get the call sign W1BPW. I thought to myself, gee, that's kind of a long, that's a long call sign. So I sent WN1BPW. And I said, wow, that's kind of a long call. Gee, I wish I'd have a better call. Well, if I go to the future, I did get a different call, W1UU. But before that, there was a lot of excitement I had because I was building radios, transmitters. My father gave me a Heathkit AT1 kit, so I had to build that. And then he saw I was doing good, so he said, I'll buy you a Helicopters S-38. They were popular back at that time. So I had a very supportive family about my new endeavor.
This was your first rig then, was the AT-1 and the S-38?
Yes, technically speaking, yes. But I had somehow acquired these ARC-V radios that were used on Jeeps. So I loved opening them up, but I didn't have the skills to modify them until later on. When I was in my late teens, I started to do that. But officially, it was a Heathkit AT-1 transmitter, and I had a pair of crystals. So I had two frequencies. And then the S-38 was, I thought, a very nice receiver. Compared to today, it's pretty elemental. But what do you know when you're a 13-year-old kid about to embark upon kind of an interesting career?
Did amateur radio play a part then in the choices that you made for your education and career?
Yes. And I can tell you precisely when I had my eureka moment. I was really enjoying the ham radio to the point my father said, do your homework, don't play with a radio. I'm sure that would have happened to anybody at that age. All of a sudden, there was big news on the radio. They said, and it was October 4th, 1957. The news was the Russians put up a satellite called Sputnik. And I said, wow, putting a satellite up. You know, I'm using stuff like wires and crystals and all that kind of stuff. Who ever heard of putting a satellite up? I said, boy, this is kind of interesting. So I had made some friends with other people, and we had to pick up the telemetry. So we all sat around and we built up a telemetry receiver so we could hear this magical sound coming out of Sputnik. And it was beep, beep, beep. That's all it was. But, you know, we picked up the sound, and I was thrilled to death. And, you know, I didn't think of the Soviet Union in political terms. I looked at it as, wow, that's something. So I thought to myself, gee, I better tell my dad and my mother what I want to be when I grow up. You know, and of course, I thought I was growing up when I was that age. I says, I want to be a microwave systems engineer. And my mother nodded her head, oh, that's fine. And my father said, oh, fine, that's fine. But they didn't know what I was talking about. But I sort of knew because I had learned through the ham radio, there were frequency bands. People used the lower bands to work DX and all around the world. But then when you're talking about telemetry and things used in satellites, you're talking about things that are moving into the microwave spectrum. So what should I do when I go to college? And so I pursued BSEE in Rutgers. I graduated from there in 1962. And as it turns out, at that school, they were very proud of anybody getting a BSEE because not too many people got through that course. I was told that there was 150 people studying, and I think 23 of us finally got to graduation. But it was mainly motor systems and electrical distribution. But I convinced one of my professors, and I said, gee, I want to be a microwave systems engineer. What should I do? And then he kind of guided me along to say, you better start learning about microwave, radar, a whole bunch of different things. And what clicked in my mind is that as you get older, you start thinking about, you know, some nuances. And I said, well, gee, you know, it sounds to me that if someone like the Russians put up a satellite, we better get on the ball and get technology going. Well, actually, it had. They talked about the radars that we used, equipment on airplanes, ships, and all that type of thing, which are very complicated. But I told myself, I'm going to learn all this complicated stuff because it's going to be a real future in microwave. And I can assure you there is. So that was the genesis and how ham radio kind of set me on the path. And, of course, I really liked the idea I had a supportive family.
And now this message from ICOM America. ICOM wants to wish you a very happy 2021. This happiness should include hours of fun and enjoyment with the new ICOM IC705 portable transceiver. The ICOM IC705 is the perfect sidekick for amateurs that enjoy operating any mode both indoors and outdoors. It is the perfect QRP companion with base station features and functionality at the tip of your fingers in a portable package covering HF 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. This compact rig weighs in just over 2 pounds. The ICOM IC705 has RF direct sampling for most of the HF band and IF sampling for frequencies above 25 megahertz. Its other features include a 4.3-inch touchscreen with live band scope and waterfall display, 5 watts out with a BP272 battery pack, or 10 watts with a 13.8 volts DC from an external power source. Operating modes include single sideband CW, AM, FM, digital modes, as well as full D-Star functions, a micro USB connector, Bluetooth, wireless LAN, integrated GPS with antenna and GPS logger, micro SD card slot. The HM243 speaker microphone is standard equipment and included in the box. The IC705 supports QRP and QRPP operations. And the perfect accessory for the IC705 is now available in the LC192 optional backpack that includes a special compartment for your IC705 with room for accessories for soda activation or a day's social distancing in the park. Of course, there is a huge list of available accessories, including cables, batteries, and software listed on the ICOM IC705 website. Folks, this is a fine rig with many available positive online reviews. It will become the de facto standard as a baseband rig for microwave operators, and since it now has the RS-BA1 IP-based remote control software, the IC705 will be the first choice as a remote-based rig. You owe it to yourself to make the ICOM IC705 your transceiver of choice for the new year. Be sure to click on the banner ad in this week's show notes page for more information on this amazing rig. But once you do that, be sure to call your favorite ICOM dealer to place your order. The ICOM IC705 is in stock and shipping today. And when you do that, please be sure to tell your dealer that you heard it here on QSO Today. Thanks as always to ICOM for sponsoring the QSO Today podcast. Be sure to visit www.icomamerica.com/amateur for more information on other ICOM radios as well. And now back to our QSO. So what was the first career move out of Rutgers? What did you do?
Well, I had a summer job working for a company that made photoelectric controls for streetlights. It's nothing to do with microwave, but being a technician, and I was basically tuning up gadgets and things. But I knew what was going on. A lot of it was like transistorized circuitry, and the end goal was to make a high-volume production product. But they assigned me to put me on onto a system to monitor the radiation characteristics of water going out of nuclear sites. I said, "Oh, kind of interesting," and all that type of thing. But what kind of got me going is they wanted me to come back from my senior year. So I had a job waiting for me, which I thought was great, and I felt very proud of myself that I proved to someone that I could actually do work in a work type of environment. So I joined the company, and I started my career, and I also learned what happens when a company you work for doesn't do so well. I had a life to live, so I had to start thinking about, what do I really want to do? So do you want to hear the next phase?
Absolutely.
All right.
I want to hear, because, you're sitting in a very interesting corridor there in those period of time. I think the Bell Laboratories was there in New Jersey, and RCA. I mean, it seems to me that there was a lot of opportunities there.
Well, actually there were. In one of the companies that I had interviewed for, I had to do the interviews, which was a good thing, was Norden in Connecticut. And they made a bomb site that was very famous and used in the wars. But you're right, Bell Labs was down there. But I was one of a few lone people from Massachusetts coming to school in New Jersey. And I think at the time, the total population, the student population, there was 1,700. So I said, I want to go home. I want to go home to Massachusetts. That's where my home is. So that's what brought me back. But to continue on with the story, I said, microwave. Who are the microwave people? Well, there was one in Burlington, Massachusetts called Microwave Associates. And they had this huge sign on top of the building. I didn't know what they did, but I said, they have the word microwave. And I knew they didn't make microwave ovens because Raytheon was making the ovens. So I went there for an interview, and that's when my eyes really got wide open. There were all kinds of microwave things. There were different customers for them. And I went in as a rookie sales engineer. So I didn't actually have to design or build things. I just had to learn how to present to people what the company did. And the company really thrived on having what they called the sales engineer. So that was my launch, if you will.
What products did they make, Microwave Associates?
Well, a lot of things that they made were waveguide plumbing, but they also had what I thought was the most interesting stuff, which was a lot of switches. They were PIN diode type switches. So instead of a mechanical switch, there'd be just basically an electronic switch, but it could handle microwave frequencies without a lot of loss. But the other thing that they did that really got my attention was they started to build microwave receivers, because a lot of the frequency bands were being exploited for, guess what? The cellular system. And there's another story out, if I have the time, I can tell you about that, is how I fell into some of these things. But I fell into things because I was thinking. I was trying to connect everything that I did. So, but that's kind of a thing. Then I learned all about all the other microwave companies that existed. And I found out that in Massachusetts, a fellow by the name of Otis was part of the Massachusetts government. He was the economic person to try to stimulate the economy in Massachusetts. And they call Route 128 that goes around Boston basically the high tech mile. And so a lot of companies in the microwave business, a lot meaning probably about 20, were located in that area. So I said, gee, at least there's places to go if I don't make it with Microwave Associates. Maybe I'd be going some other place.
Did you stay in microwave for the rest of your career? Did it make a crescendo?
I got lucky. I'm officially retired, but of course I pay taxes to the government, so I still have a business. I don't want to tell you what the name is because I don't want to have people calling me up.
So you don't really want to sell out of that business, is that right?
Right. Well, there's many facets to what I've accumulated, all related to ham radio, so I don't want to lose that side of the business. But I run a wireless internet service. That's where I am today. And I have a couple of very high-end customers that I provide internet service from a fiber line. But guess what I use?
Microwave.
That's right. But this business has gone ballistic as far as I'm concerned. They're coming up with all these full duplex radios, and what cost $15,000 several years ago, we're selling for like $95.
Right, kind of like the same stuff that like Arden uses, right?
Yeah, there's several other brands. They're actually good European brands, like Microtech is one that comes to mind. That's where I began. They're very good, and there's Ubiquity Wireless, which is also very good. But that's part of my business. So what I found my true love is I love to design the systems. But when it comes time to design something and then apply it where consumers have to use it, what a lesson I got on that, because everybody told me that, I'm paying $25 a month from brand C. What's your stuff cost? And I said, oh, mine's good. It's only $100. And of course, they'd hang up the phone. You start to learn pretty quick that, when you make something, it might be fantastic, but you have to have people to buy it. But that's why I really prepared myself in the sales engineering type of thing. And another very important company I worked for was Sanders Associates, which was in the defense business. So I finally learned a lot about how microwave was used and how it would be manufactured. Sanders was a very big company in New Hampshire. I think they had 10,000 employees at the time. So certainly with ham radio, I knew what I was doing. But the most important thing is I knew how to earn a living, and I found my skill set that keeps me going. So even though I'm retired today, people call up and I make some very interesting designs. I could talk to you about that, but maybe the actual website to go to today, and I have all my URLs pointing to fibercape.com. So fibercape.com is really what I call Fibercape Internet Services. And I'm a division of, and my corporate company is Homeland Security Wireless. And my original customer base were basically the police and fire departments, the cellular people so I did a lot of consulting work for those companies. One of my big projects happened to be in Rhode Island in the prison system. I used some of the modern technology to solve a problem of using handheld radios inside of prisons.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I don't want to speak on that because someone will record it and they'll figure out, oh, that's how you talk to people, huh?
Were you active the entire time of your career as an amateur radio operator?
I have to say yes. The biggest thing that launched me, actually, is when I graduated from Rutgers. I told myself, gee, somebody wants me to work for them. So that was number one. The second thing is I've got some money. I could do things. I can buy big things. I can have a lot of fun. I can do lots of stuff. And I also learned that I like being competitive. So I really had gravitated very quickly, not only DXing and fishing people out of the pond, as one of my friends used to say, but also get involved in contesting activity. And I did very well. I won a couple. And I continued probably extremely actively up through maybe when I was 30. So all through my 20s. And then there was a period of time where, I got married. So that obviously created a need to pay attention to what's going on. Even then, the places that I lived, I made sure I had an acre of land at least. And I put up towers, and I actually did a lot of work on putting up antennas. But it was all to be competitive because I thought if I can improve my techniques, especially on CW, which I had no problem with, I learned a lot about how to participate in contesting. And that in turn brought me in contact with a lot of people who were very active in the days in the 60s and the 70s, some of which are still quite active today. So that's probably the best way of describing it. I'd say I'm on just about every day. I like to rag chew in the morning on CW. Then during the rest of the day, I've got my chores and stuff to do and a little bit of the business. And then at nighttime, I like to do the same thing again. So I have a routine. I like it. My wife supports it. Nobody else in the family is interested, but they are interested in the music stuff. So I'm a very contented person, quite frankly.
Let me take a quick break to tell you about my favorite amateur radio audio podcast, and that's the Ham Radio Workbench podcast with George, KJ6VU, Jeremy, KF7IJZ, and it now includes Michael Walker, VA3MW, where they pursue topics, technology, and projects on their ham radio workbenches every 2 weeks. The group documents their projects and makes circuit boards available to their listeners. They have interesting guests and go in deep. Jeremy may complain about the overall length of the podcast, but friends, let me tell you that I could listen to it all day, and that's good. Even if you are a seasoned ham radio builder or just getting started, be sure to join George, Jeremy, and Mike now for the Ham Radio Workbench podcast on every podcast player. Use the link on this week's show notes page by clicking on the image. And now back to our QSO today. What is your proudest contesting accomplishment in ham radio?
Well, getting into one, number one.
You always have to start, right?
Right. The one that I liked best actually had a physical prize. It was called the Bermuda Contest. And if you won the contest, there were two entries. CW and phone. Well, I've never been much in the phone. So I entered the CW one, and I won. So what you had to do is you had to get to Bermuda. The only thing that they said is, well, you got to come to Bermuda. And I said, well, I'm married and I just had a baby son and all. And they said, no problem. We'll help you out. Well, what they did, and everybody knew this, they gave me a plane ticket. I had to pay for the place I stayed, but they basically flew me there along with another fellow. And he and I met up later in life skiing together up in New Hampshire. So we talked about that. So that was probably the most fun contest to be in. But the most serious one was the ARRL contest, the weekends over 2 months. But it was the DX competition. And I had learned all through operating, how to be on which band and what to do. And, you're basically doing 2 48-hour stints. But when you're young, you can sort of tolerate that. So it was basically a 96-hour contest, but I was number one in the U.S. And that was a very proud achievement. And I rather liked that. And I was never able to repeat that, but I always was in what I called the top 10, probably for about 15 years. And there were other contests like the CQ Worldwide. But I found out also that contest does not favor anybody in the United States. You had to operate outside of the United States. And I had a friend, he and I used to get down to the Caribbean, and we did some operating down there on some of the islands. And we did very well, but we weren't the upper tier. We were like multi-op, single transmitter types. But, to do that, you had to get along with the person you're working with. But those are fun days because I was traveling around. I was a little concerned that here I am. I'm not only married, I have a family. I felt very secure with my work, but I had to be careful and kind of balance things off. So I never thought that I would be totally immersed in ham radio. That there was a personal side of which I enjoy. Certainly, the club I belong to, the CWops club. I've got a lot of great friends, and we get together like hams want to do, which we can't really do this coming year. So we're adapting some technology that'll help us out. But I've always tried to maintain the balance. And like I say, I've got a family. They all have grown, have kids of their own. I've got great grandkids and all this type of thing. So ham radio is uppermost in my personal likes, but I think I've balanced it pretty well.
So it's kind of like you're frosting on the cake of life, would you say, ham radio?
Yeah, but to eat the cake, you got to put a knife through it, so I hope that doesn't happen.
As an Elmer or as a mentor, do you recommend that new hams get involved in contesting?
Yes, and the reason for that is it's competitive, and there's many different contests you can get involved with. If you're a novice, they have the novice roundup. But I think the fundamental thing, if I may, is to kind of talk about, well, what is a contest? Well, there's all kinds of mechanisms. But I always like the CW type contests. And so that would assume that someone is interested in CW, not necessarily some of the more modern technologies like the digital technologies of today, which I think are fantastic, by the way. But it's to be competitive because that's what your life is going to be all about. And at the same time, who you're competing with, you want to meet them and say, well, how did you do that? Well, at least that's the way I looked at it. I never found a contester angry at another contester in my life, actually. But everybody talks to you and they talk about their deep feelings about things. So I feel that a young person that would come to me and said, why should I get into ham radio? And I said, there's so many facets. You'll find something for everybody. But in the end, if you want to be competitive in life, have a good job, raise a family, know how to deal with these kind of things, ham radio is kind of the way to go.
What's the current rig?
Right now, I'm using Flex radios. I started with the Flex 5000. I built my very first one because I like doing that, a DSP 11. And I liked dealing with the Flex people. So I have a Flex 6500, and I also have a Flex 6600. I decided I didn't want to have the fully integrated type radio with a screen on it, although it makes it simple. I prefer to have my computer interface with that, understand how things ought to be joined up. So that's been my choice of rigs now that go back to about 2004, 2005, I think. So if I've got the dates right.
You say you've got the 6600 and the 6500 and the 5000. Does an operator need more than one flex radio? Do they do different things now, or do you have them in different operating positions? Do they perform differently that you would choose one over the other?
Well, in a contest environment, it would be nice if he had an operator had a radio for that person and another one for someone like me. But the 6500 as well as the 6600 allow you to get multiple bands, but really you have multiple receivers. So you can work various contests on multiple bands. And a lot of the software and how it's being deployed is very fascinating to me to be able to do that. But no, you don't. But I have a secret. You got to ask me, what's the secret?
Peter, what is the secret?
Well, my secret is this. I'm not interested in having a big super signal. I don't want to climb towers. 80-year-old people ought not to be climbing towers.
Well, I can tell you 63-year-old people don't climb towers either.
Yeah, right. So where I'm living now, I made a decision. I said, I live in a wonderful area. It's beautiful here and so on and so forth. So I said, I'm going to go to the other side of the world here. I'm going to run QRP. So I've been doing that for the past 10 years. So I love running 5 watts. So I actually have another radio. It's the Shigu G90. It costs $450. And I said, hey, I'll use that too. I'll wire that up to see what's going on. But I do love running QRP contesting. CWops has a category for QRP operators. And I like to really, you don't win anything. You participate. That's the best part. But I try to get 1 contact per minute. And I feel I've done very well if I get 60 QSOs per minute. So what that means to me is I have to come up with good antennas. I have to have kind of a sturdy way of approaching contesting. You can't give up. If you can't work something, you have to know when to give up on it and move to the next station that you hope can happen. But particularly in CWops, I learned how they all send. So I know what frequency they're going to listen to. So I've been able to vastly improve my search and pounce type of a capability. So again, I'm always looking to me is what do I get out of this? What I used to be told is, Peter, you have a big signal. What are you using? You must have a 10 over 10 element array. And I said, well, I got a couple of tall towers, but I was never into saying that I had the big something. And that was sort of taught to me by a fellow who's now silent key is W1MV, Mike Victor. He worked for Lincoln Laboratories, and he always pointed out to his rig. In the old days, it was a 6-foot-high cabinet. It weighed 1,000 pounds, and it had the big tubes that glowed and all that type of stuff. So obviously, he was an interesting person. And he says, I can't lift anything. I wish everything was small. So basically, he was saying, hey, if the technology changes and things start to get miniaturized, which they are today with the ICs and all the microwave stuff, which I understand very well, I'm in nirvana with all the good stuff. And here at my age, it's not only new to a lot of people, but I'm ahead of everybody, I believe, personally, about understanding how all this stuff works. And even what I'm doing today to help my bank account a little bit, people like what I do. And, of course, the personal satisfaction is, I'm not sick and tired of ham radio. I think they gave me the lift out I needed.
What is the antenna arrangement there?
Well, that's almost a secret at this point, but it basically started out with a 43-foot vertical. a couple of loading coils in the base. That's not new. It's cheap, but I've got two more of these things up, and I've been learning how to phase them. So a lot of my work now is to try to figure out how to take 2 or 3 verticals, which have a very low footprint, and see how I can get multi-band coverage, or what do I have to do. So that's my latest project.
With a lot that size, you're obviously running ground radials?
Yes.
And are they on the ground or are they elevated?
Well, they're elevated, actually, because I've got, at least on, 2 sides, 6-foot fence. So it's easy to put things along there. So I tend to run the radials about 10 feet off the ground, but I can get where I'm at. Roughly the longest radials are 100 feet. The other ones actually go underneath the house.
Well, that's very clever.
I'm able to get 4 main radials, but I have about 35 radials on my main one. And right now I'm just experimenting with the others. I don't need to have any more than 4. And it's wintertime, so I just lay them on the ground for now. If it works, then I'll bury them.
So now let's talk about CWops, because I think that the way that we know each other is that we've, I think, had a conversation about coming to the expo with CWops, and I gave you a tour. And I've had other people on from CWops, but as I spend more time on the CWops website, I see that you guys are like wildly successful in terms of all of the stuff that you're doing. So first of all, let's talk about CWops. What is CWops, where you currently serve as its vice president?
Well, first of all, to become a member, you have to be observed on the bands, and you have to be sponsored by existing members. And that's the most important part, because you don't apply to become a member of the CWops. You're asked to join based on your performance of CW. Now, that's easy to do when the group first was formed, because there was a pretty substantial number of CW operators. And there's been other clubs and other situations, like the ARRL has the A1 operator. One person can write to the ARRL. Another club that formed was the FOC in England, and I became a member of that. I was invited in that back quite a long time ago. I think it was 1964. So in my heyday of operating, I guess I was noticed. But in CWops, one of the things that's very important, not only do you have to be discovered, if you will, that you've learned how to be a CW operator, but you have the ability of being a good example to other people. So the other part to that is the decision was made to form the CW Academy. And the CW Academy is to help people to learn the code and to apply it properly. And that's been wildly successful. And from what I understand, with the performance of NM5M, who made a presentation at QSO Today back in August, there was a tremendous number of signups. But that's what seems to happen. So we're very pleased about people kind of recognizing other CW operators, and that they would have to come up with a standard of performance. And that standard of performance is 25 words per minute. Of course, you don't need to know the code these days to get a license. But a lot of people kind of yearn for, hey, I'd like to try CW and see what it was going to be all about. So CW isn't going away. But there's so many other aspects of CWops that make it kind of wonderful, I think, in 3 1-hour periods.
Now, you're mentioning that you've got a newsletter, a monthly newsletter. By the way, I've looked at it. It's amazing. Where does this newsletter go?
This goes to all the members.
Okay, and the members are where? Are they just concentrated on the eastern seaboard of the United States?
Oh, no, they're all around the world, but there's a preponderance of people in the United States, as you can well imagine. But the most amazing thing that I'd like to point out is within the newsletter is called Solid Copy. And Solid Copy has the bios of all the incoming members. And I find them extremely fascinating because they talk about what we're talking about. How did you begin, and what did you do, and why do you like being in CW? You hear all kinds of interesting stories, and of course, they're all proud of being members. But the other aspect is we have the CW tests, CWTs, every Wednesday, 3 one-hour sessions. And although some people take it seriously to be like the top of your game, me too, because I like to be top of the QRP group, it's really developing your skills, and it's not untypical to run your code speeds up to 40, 45 words per minute. I actually have a nickname given to me from time to time. So it's a fun thing where, you're not out to kill somebody or anything like that. You're just out to enjoy yourself. But on the other hand, there's another group that just likes rag chewing. So there's a group of people that write in and talk about, how many different contacts they've had and how interesting the rag chew sessions are. Generally, they're more than 20 minutes. They try to encourage rag chewing like an hour, that type of thing. And there's actually quite a group of several hundred people that love to do rag chewing. And there's, of course, other people that like to get high DXEC totals and all that type of stuff. That kind of comes with the territory. But it's extremely well written. But I think anybody getting through one of the copies will see that CWops is just more than just operating CW and, having a cup of coffee and going away to work or whatever they might do. There's a lot of things that make people stay.
You said that in order to become a member of CWops, you have to be sponsored, kind of like a Masonic order. But to become a member of the CW Academy or a student at the Academy, do you also have to be sponsored?
Not to become a member, to participate in the CW Academy. That's strictly a learning process of which, at the conclusion, you're not an automatic member of the CWops, but if you've got the skills to reach 25 words per minute, and of course, you actually improve your CW skills by participating in the CW tests, that many of the members have been able to advance their code speed such that they meet what we call the minimal type requirements.
So you're saying that, of course, CWops doesn't have a secret handshake or a uniform?
No, not at all. What it is that your members demonstrate how to have fun using CW. And if you belong to an organization that is spread over many different disciplines and things, this would be a wonderful organization to belong to. Not only are you talking back and forth via ham radio and using CW, you can operate other modes. We're not trying to say, if you operate FTA, you can't be a member. Not that kind of a club. That can be fundamentally fun. There's another very important thing, I feel, and I really like it. Once a year, we give out awards to other people who are advancing the state of the art in CW. And there's a number of clubs that have been formed. The last one was over in England. That's all CW. And so CWops gave them a plaque for their work doing that. FOC has given CWops a pat in the back that way, and CWops has given FOC a pat in the back. So it's kind of the camaraderie of CW, but making sure people understand that there's a full breadth of activities on CW that could be appealing to people. And I think that's the exciting part. And one thing that brings us all together, in my way of looking at things, is I believe meeting some of the other people, you find that a lot of people have the same levels of passion, but they're all unique. So there's some people that you say, well, there's a Dr. Strangelove here and there in the world, but I'd be hard pressed to find anyone in CWops that is of that kind of a character.
Now, it seems to me, actually, after reading around the website, and the website is extremely well structured. It looks like the organization is extremely well structured. It's not just thrown together, but there's been a lot of thought around its organization and its activities and stuff. But it's my understanding that you're kind of the manager of CWops ambassadors, that you actually have ambassadors. And what do ambassadors do?
Well, What they should do is spread the message. First of all, in my work, I could simply call myself that I'm a sales engineer and evangelist and all that type of thing. So my work was to find sales representatives for the products that I would sell so I can earn a living working in a business. But an ambassador is the same thing. It's the equivalent of a sales representative. And that's where QSO Today actually comes into play here. And I'll explain this briefly. But what we found is that we need to have our ambassadors. They should be given a description of what they're supposed to do. And basically is to identify forums of interest. And we've kind of came up with a list of 12 forums of interest. One of them is to figure out how we could participate in virtual shows. That's why we have an interest in participating in QSO Today, especially after talking with NM5M, who gave his talk and described how great it was about finding people to join up with the CW Academy. So their role is to identify how are things going to be done today. We have the COVID issues, and everybody knows that this preventing us from meeting. So everybody is now reaching for technologies that can meld very easily in with what we do. And the fact that I'm talking to you and using the latest and greatest techniques is something that technically I understand and how I've earned a living, but also it's overcoming the obstacle of not seeing anybody face to face until you guys came along.
Well, CWops, along with AMSAT, has purchased an exhibit booth at the next QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo, which is really cool. Can I ask you, for those clubs that are considering coming to the expo, what do you hope to achieve there? I think I showed you our new platform. Do you think that will be an opportunity to actually take CWops to even more hams?
I think the bottom line is yes, but I have a challenge as well because I'm trying to organize for our participation. And so obviously I've been touching base with other CWops members to say, well, this is what I plan to do. Like, how do you upload some of the things that I'll be giving in my talk about modern CW operating techniques. So to me, I'm in the beginning of another wonderful ride, you might say. I don't have all the answers, but I know how to ask questions.
Well, Peter, we're very excited about having CWops on our platform. And I showed you the new AirMeet platform that we're using for creating a CWops lounge at the expo so that perhaps these various groups inside of CWops can get together and welcome new people into it.
That's exactly what we're looking for. Not only to have a lounge, but I look at what we're doing is participating in the show. There's really a breakout room where people answer questions for people who go up and down the aisle. And in the past shows that we've attended, even over in Japan and Germany and so forth, people do ask a lot of questions about what we do, and that's helping to get the word out that we're really an internationally oriented type of a group of CW people. So that's how it is, and obviously doing virtual things and having a chance to have a meeting afterwards. I can say, by a great example, at the last Dayton that I went to, we had a meeting at the Spaghetti Warehouse.
Right.
The room holds 100, but 130 people showed up. This isn't what you would want to have with COVID. that would never work. But in that room, there was so much electricity going through the air that everybody was yelling at each other. And I have a way of looking at things. I don't think too many people were eating, but everybody had like a plate of spaghetti, you know, that kind of stuff, and maybe a bottle of wine or beer or something. But man, everybody was talking back and forth, and I found that I had to yell too. I told everybody, I said, "Hey, I'm QRP. I can't yell." Again, from a positive thing is that it looks like we can have a little bit better control type of thing, and we hope we can have 20 breakout rooms, but we'll talk about that later.
I think that just for the listeners, we're using a new platform in August. I wasn't aware that we had 16,000 people on the platform. With the new platform, I think that we'll all be aware of how many people are actually there. And then, as I say, we talked a little bit about a lounge. This lounge will actually have the ability for people to break out together and then move from table to table so that you could talk about just about everything. I'm hoping that there's a lot of those hallway conversations that will get people interested in CWops and all of its advantages.
You got it exactly right. That's what we hope will be achieved. Well, that's the learning process. Like I say, I don't have all the answers, but you're a pretty good listener. So between the two, I think we'll be kind of happy with the outcome and probably come back with a lot better ideas and about how to manage these kind of things.
I think we've learned as a society, maybe as a species, we've learned a lot about how to communicate in an alternative environment because of the COVID-19 thing, don't you think?
Well, as long as we're not communicating in the twilight zone, we'll be all set.
So, Peter, I have a question for you because you seem like a guy that gets a lot done. How do you find the time to do all of the things that you're doing, including operating time?
Well, that's a good question, but being retired, I don't have fundamentally any technical problems with my business, so I can continue the business. So that's good. So I don't have to put fires out once an hour by someone calling up and saying, my internet is down. What am I supposed to do? Whatever it might be. Actually, I have stuff that just goes on. It's been going on for like years. And the only complaints I would have that way were people wanting to have more bandwidth. But that's what the ISP business is all about. But because I've been selective about it, I don't put my work and what I do for my work does not occupy a lot of my day. So the rest of the time is being with my wife. We like to get in the car and travel around, and we like to talk to the kids and stuff. And to balance it off, I have my friends I like to talk to, and my wife has a lot of her friends that she talks to on Zoom. So I want to add one more thing, if I may.
Sure.
My wife was born in Portugal, and she came over when she was 11. And then she became a teacher. And my daughter also became a teacher. Nothing wrong with that. But I decided I want to learn how to speak Portuguese. So there's a university that's close by, UMass, in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And that's like the center of the Portuguese North American universe, in a way. They're all over the place, but big concentration of Portuguese. So I went to class there, and I was 70 years old. And I went there, and a lot of people came up to me and said, "Oh, professor, nice to meet you." I said, "Well, I'm here to learn. I'm not a professor." So all the younger ones, they would say, "Oh," but the teachers that I had knew. Anybody teaching knows this, that if you have someone who's, I don't want to use the word elderly, but someone who really wants to learn, they like dealing with those kind of people. So all the teachers that I had gave me, were very supportive of what I'm doing. But I also learned what I could do best. And speaking Portuguese flawlessly was not one of them. But I read and have read once a year the Moby Dick novel. And they read it in Portuguese. And I'm one of 50 readers. And I love being a part of that. So there's things that I do that give me personal satisfaction. And obviously my wife likes the idea that I understand her culture. But I did one other thing. I became president of the Portuguese club in town. And so I kind of learned a couple of things. First of all, how to speak loudly and how to speak at the same time others speak.
Well, that's a cultural thing, right?
But I really found, this is the last point, because I can talk forever about this. The one thing that I found I could do well is I could write. In other words, I had a command of writing. When you speak different than you do when you're writing. But I kind of like that. And one of the professors said, "Peter, can you go up and read what you wrote?" And I said, it's kind of long. He says, "Might take me 10 minutes to read it." He said, No, go ahead. So I read what I did, and I had everybody spellbound. I'm saying, I didn't think I was going to have a command of anybody speaking of my broken Portuguese, so however you want to look at it. But I told the big lie, and the lie was that when my wife came from Portugal when she was 11, I created a story that I was born here in the United States, but my father wanted to have a job over in Portugal in the textile industry. So my family wanted me to go to Portugal and learn to live over there. But when I say it's a lie, it would never happen. But people were kind of spellbound that I actually had a story to tell them. A lot of people said, "Did you really do that? Is that what you did?" And then I said, "I think I've learned what I need to know. And what I need to know is I ought to shut up and not speak as much."
Yeah, it's just a yarn about the textile industry.
Right, but I put a ham radio into all this. But the story is so interesting that we don't have time for me to...
What excites you the most about ham radio now?
Well, right now, it's what I'm involved with is basically driven by the CWops. I like the idea of operating with minimum power levels, but having a skill set of operating in a contest and being heard. So for me, it's adapting towards using CW in a different way, and compared to other forms of communication, I really like CW. That's probably the best way of describing things. So I'm relaxed. I don't get tensed on what I'm doing. I think I'm skillful about being heard. It's a bunch of callers. There might be 20. And there's one of the CWops club members is now automatically recording his sessions. So I've actually heard myself calling him in a contest. So I'm continuing to learn. That's the most exciting part. So it keeps drawing me back to do it every day.
And what advice would you give to newer returning hams to the hobby?
Well, when they return after having been licensed, I read those kind of stories in the newsletter, Solid Copy, that we have. And it turns out a lot of people miss what a part of their life. Of course, you're growing up or having a job, raising a family and all that type of stuff. So it's to reinforce them that the hobby itself is not going away. We're just doing different things and adapting to technologically what's going on. So it's CW is maybe an older practice, but it's an art form. And that's what CWops stands for. It's the art of CW operating that's important. And I like that message.
So you'd like to advise newer returning hams that they should explore the art of CW?
Yes, and to let them know that there's more than just trying to learn the Morse code.
Right, as an art form.
That's right. I'm making a confession.
I'll hear your confession. Peter, it was really lovely to speak with you. I really enjoyed this so much. And I want to thank you and wish you 73.
Well, thank you very much. 73 to you. And let's meet again.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Peter. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in W1UU in the search box at the top of the page. Be sure to click on the Expo menu item at the top of the page for updates on the upcoming QSO Today Virtual Ham Expo. I'm updating it as I have more information. My thanks to ICOM America for its support of the QSO Today podcast. Please show your support of ICOM America by clicking on their banner in the show notes pages. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any other episode into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing the subscribe buttons on the show notes pages. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages, or use my Amazon link before shopping at Amazon. Amazon gives me a small commission on your purchases while at the same time protecting your privacy. I'm grateful for any way that you show appreciation and support. It makes a big difference as I head towards episode 400. QSO Today is now available in the iHeart, Radio, Spotify, YouTube, and a bunch of other online audio services, including the iTunes Store. Look on the right side of the show notes pages for a listing of these services. You can use the Amazon Echo and say, Alicia, play the QSO Today podcast from TuneIn. My thanks to Ben Bresky, who edits every single show and allows both this host and my guest to sound brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Until next time, this is Eric for Z1UG 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.